This morning I spoke to United States Secretary of Defence Hagel. This was the first conversation that we've had since his nomination and appointment to the position of Secretary of Defence. Secretary of Defence Hagel has previously visited Australia. He is, of course, a Vietnam veteran, and he fondly remembered his time in Sydney. He also drew to attention that his father was a World War II veteran who had spent time both in the Pacific but also in Australia. So the new Secretary of Defence for the United States has a very clear appreciation of the long-standing importance of the relationship between Australia and the United States and the long-standing importance of our alliance. We spoke about the importance of our alliance and the enhanced practical cooperation that we have seen in recent years. This includes the rotation of Marines through Darwin and proposals down the track for enhanced aerial access to United States air fleet through the Northern Territory, and also, as I've previously described it, last cab off the rank, the prospect of greater naval access to our Indian Ocean port, HMAS Sterling, in Western Australia. We also spoke about transition in Afghanistan. Secretary Hagel made the point that he, like his predecessors, Secretary Panetta and Secretary Gates, has been most impressed with the way in which Australia has stood shoulder to shoulder with the United States throughout our mission in Afghanistan. I briefed the Secretary on progress so far as transition is concerned in Oruzgan province. We also spoke about the importance of the United States rebalance. And I made the point to Secretary Hagel how in Australia's eyes, for the last half dozen years, we've been arguing that the world is moving in our direction, moving in the direction of the Asia-Pacific, moving in the direction of the Indian Ocean. The rise of China, the rise of India, the ongoing expansion of the ASEAN economies, the emergence of Indonesia as a global influence, not just a regional influence, and the ongoing economic and strategic importance of Japan and North Korea. We spoke about the importance for defence ministers and defence secretaries of the Shangri-La Dialogue, which is held in Singapore every year, and Secretary Hagel reminded me of his involvement in the early Shangri-La dialogues. He invited me to visit Washington, and we've agreed that to pursue the consolidation of our ongoing practical cooperation, that I should visit Washington in the next couple of months. So I look forward to meeting Secretary Hagel in Washington in the course of the next couple of months. We also spoke of the importance of OSMIN. You'll recall that in the last 3 years we've had OSMIN in Perth in 2012, in San Francisco in 2011 and in Melbourne in 2010. So in the course of my visit to Washington to meet formally with Secretary Hagel, we'll discuss the timing and the location for this year's OSMIN. It's of course the United States turn, so OSMIN this year will be held in the United States. Before responding to your questions, can I just make some remarks about the tragic civilian casualty incident that we've seen in Afghanistan over the last few days. This is the first opportunity I've had to make public remarks. Firstly, you'll be aware that COM-ISAF, General Dunford, and General Hurley, the Chief of the Defence Force, have both issued public apologies for this terrible and tragic incident. ISAF and the Australian Defence Force, ISAF and the ADF, have accepted responsibility for this incident, and it's a tragedy for the families concerned, and both ISAF and the ADF have apologised to the families. An ADF investigation is underway, as is an ISAF investigation, and until these investigations are complete, I'm not proposing to be drawn on the details of the incident. What we do know is that a terrible tragedy has occurred. The ADF and ISAF have accepted responsibility and made that point to Afghan authorities and to the families concerned. The Australian Defence Force has a long and proud history of doing everything it can to avoid civilian casualties or civilian involvement in the course of military operations or in warlike operations. We have very strict rules of engagement, and the reputation of the Australian Defence Force is first class in the manner in which it seeks to avoid the involvement of civilians in combat operations. This incident involved our Special Operations Task Group, but as I've said earlier, and as General Hurley has said over the last couple of days, we're not proposing to comment on speculation or be drawn on details of the incident until those two reviews that I've referred to, the ADF review and the ISAF review, have been concluded. I'm happy to respond to your questions on those or other matters.
In regards to the WA election, what hope does Mark McGowan have for actually winning the election?
Well, I said before the campaign began that Colin Barnett started favourite, and I don't think it would surprise anyone if I said as the last week of the campaign commences, he's still the favourite. Having said that, I think Mark McGowan has done a very good job. He's done a very good job of seizing the initiative in the campaign. I think he's had a better campaign than Colin Barnett. He's got up public transport and Metronet as one of the absolutely essential reforms required to take Perth and Western Australia's transport arrangements into the second half of this century. So if you want to use some racing parlance, Mark's rounded into the straight for the last stretch of the campaign. He's performed very well, and I think he will finish very strongly. Unlike others, I don't believe that the election result is preordained or predetermined. I think it's going to be a competition, and I think Mark McGowan, to his great credit, has made it a competition.
We're seeing lavish attention on Western Sydney. Can Western Australia expect the same treatment?
Well, as you might expect, I've got a weakness, a fondness and a love of all matters west, whether it's the western side of a country or a continent or the western part of a city. And you would have seen yesterday the announcements that the Prime Minister and the Minister for Transport and Infrastructure made, deeply significant for transport and infrastructure so far as the people of Western Sydney are concerned. In the course of the time between now and the 14th of September, I'm sure in Western Australia and in Perth, you'll see a focus on the great things which the government has done in Western Australia. And in the course of the last couple of weeks, Anthony Albanese and I have been in Perth making the point that the largest single infrastructure or roads infrastructure project that we've seen in Western Australia, the so-called Gateway project, fixing the roads up around the airport, $1 billion project where the Commonwealth is paying 2/3, over $660 million, a deeply significant infrastructure project for Perth and Western Australia, both for our economy and socially. The opening of the second terminal, T2, at Perth Airport. So there's a considerable amount of infrastructure work that's been done by the government for the West. And you'll see a focus in Western Australia of these achievements and promises for the future, just as you see them in Western Sydney and elsewhere in the country.
Just back to the death of the two boys in Afghanistan, do you think that this has put further strain on the relationship with the Afghan president?
Well, President Karzai has obviously expressed his